One of the things that I needed to do while researching on food is to dig into books. You have to go to libraries, sometimes you have to travel to places like the Leiden University to do a bit of excavation in the libraries, in the stacks. Back here, I counted quite a bit on the collection of the Singapore National Library. One person that has done so much work on researching publication done in this part of the world, in Malaya, especially this publication that came from 1920s and 30s, written in Jawi, Malay in Arabic script, is Toffa Abdul. So we have her with us today to share with us about her work that she has done. She has profiled two very important pioneers of cookbook writing. One is Siti Radia and the other is Haja Asfia. Both are available online for you to read and appreciate their contributions. So, could you please welcome Toffa Abdul.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Encik Kir, for inviting me to speak and also for organizing this symposium. So, just a bit about myself. I'm from the National Library, Singapore. I work with Singapore and Southeast Asia collections. So, a few of the books, especially towards the later half, will be books that are available at the National Library. So if you're interested, you can check out, I'm promoting library resources. You can approach me, or if you're interested, you can always view the catalogue online. These books are not digitized, however, so you will need to come down physically to the library. The earlier section of this presentation will also feature books that I've encountered at the British Library. I haven't had the chance to go to Leiden to scour their collections. And this presentation is not meant to be a comprehensive survey of Malayan cookbooks, but just some highlights that I've encountered. Yeah. So today, my presentation called Ilmu Masak-Masak, Publishing Cookbooks in Malaya and Singapore. So just a little bit about the context. I'll be talking about the pre-war cookbooks and the post-war cookbooks, and also highlight some of the continuities and the changes that happened as society transited from pre-war, pre-Japanese occupation, and after World War II. So these are just some of the covers of the cookbooks. A little bit also about cookbooks is that why study cookbooks? My interest actually came about not very long ago. It was actually during COVID, or sometime before COVID, when I had the privilege of working with Dr. Jeffrey Pakiam from the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, where he wanted to study the culinary biographies of food in Singapore. And that's why I encountered a lot of these cookbooks, thanks to him. And cookbooks are repositories of culinary knowledge. They tell the culture of a certain time, the availability of ingredients, what was trending at that time. As of today, you have like mala restaurants and things like that, but what were people eating at home and cooking at home? And a lot of these cookbooks, they were actually, most of it, or if not all, were targeted at women because the 20th century was a time when women had a role as mothers, wives, and daughters. And there were not many women who actually were in the workforce, and a lot of their role was domestic. And also about the writing and publishing industry, maybe I'll just go to the next slide. Okay, so you see the kinds of covers and the kinds of formatting we have. So the books were written in Jawi, the Arabic script for Malay, and they were pretty rudimentary. And this was not unique to Malay cookbooks, Malay language cookbooks, but also as a general, other kinds of cookbooks that were written by the British women or Dutch women. As compared to the rest of publishing, cookbooks actually only made up 3.4% of the total number of books produced by Malay language authors in Singapore and Malaya, 3.4%, which is a very, very small amount. during the pre-war period. But this would change later after the war ended, with even more proliferation of magazines, literature, novels, as well as cookbooks in the market. And sorry, not cookbooks was 3.4%, it was female authors. Regardless of race or ethnicity, we only had 3.4% of authors who were female. And cookbooks only made up a mere 4.8% of all non-fiction Malay literature. And under non-fiction Malay literature, there were also other genres such as social sciences, history, and politics. This is one that I found from the British Library, and it's showing cookbook called Peraturan Memasak dan Pedoman Kaum Isteri, cooking guidelines and wives guidebook by Encik Fatimah. I wasn't even able to find much information about her, but she was apparently a teacher at Al-Huda Religious School in Penang, and was probably related or married to the publisher, Dabab Haji Muhammad Saleh. Okay, so here you have his company's name, C. Dabab Company, and it was published in 1931, featuring 68 recipes, different ways of preparing all kinds of meat and seafood, from rendang Padang, roast ayam. Roast ayam was something that was pretty popular pre-war. I think it's an emulation of trying to emulate the kind of roast that the European wives would have done in Indonesia, in Netherlands, East Indies, and in British Malaya. Beef steak, pastel, gulai or curry, stewed daging lembu, dalcha, korma, nasi biryani. So you have different influences, not just from the Western world, but also from the Indian or Persian influence. And something called bread soup, not really sure what it is. Pindang, masak asam, and pais, ikan bunga air, a name for ikan bilis. It also includes recipes for puddings, biscuit, cakes, and pastries, and also chapters on how to manage the household. So a lot of women who were educated at that time, who had the privilege of actually venturing out of their homes, were teachers. Like Cik Fatimah, she was a teacher at the Al-Huda Religious School. And for Zabaria Alang Ismail, she was an ex-school teacher. At the point of publishing of this book in 1936, she was an ex-school teacher who was from Perak. And in the preface, the publisher's note also mentioned about how the publisher hopes that this book would be useful to girls studying in girls' school. So a lot of the time, these cookbooks, they double head as school texts. Because during that time, there were not a lot of literature written targeted at girls in vernacular schools. And Zabaria, she went by this motto, tiada rotan, akar pun berguna. When there's no rattan, you use the roots, meaning, to make the best out of something, being resourceful. And she herself, she wasn't a chef or a cook, but she was simply someone who wanted to document the recipes and compile them into something that was educational and being used in school. So you notice that in the cover of the book, there's the word Penggal Satu. So I haven't come across Penggal Dua or any other volumes or terms of the book. So I'm not sure whether she went on to write the same pelajaran membuat cake dan kuih. Also, you notice some of peculiar names like Parker House Rolls, which is an American-style roll, waffles, luncheon rolls, sandwich, cut and come again cake. I guess it's an addictive cake. And a Lady Golden Glow cake, okay, which is, I think, a chocolate cake that is layered alongside what we are more familiar with, like kuih bakar, kuih makmur, baulu kemboja, and baulu lapis. Okay, another teacher. Wait, was she a teacher? No, she wasn't a teacher, sorry. She was someone from Medan, Delhi, Madam Alfi Zahara. She was from Sumatra, And but she was living. She had this published in Penang on the commission of the Malay Literature Bureau in 1939, called Pedoman Kuih, or Kuih Guidebook. And she lists recipes for kuih cara Barat dan Timur. And the first section actually almost 100 recipes of just kuih in the Western style. That was the first part of her book, and then followed by kuih in the Eastern style, about another 30 recipes. So you see the priority of the order. There was also a vogue for learning new forms of kuih that was novel at that time. And including an advertisement, so because some of these books, they include advertisements by the publishers. This one includes an advertisement for Gulai Sumatra, which was to be written by Rangkayo Esa. Rangkayo is the honorific title for a married woman in Sumatra, and also for her Encik Alfizara, signifying that she's unmarried. Okay, not a lady, but just a disclaimer that not all books about food was written by women at that time. The reason being, men had more access to resources, more of them, especially in the pre-war period. There was a lot of publishing going on for religious texts. And Haji Abu Bakar was a religious scholar. He was actually the Qadi of Muar, which is pretty big, not the Mufti, but the Qadi, and also a founder of Madrasah Al-Arabiya Al-Khairiyah, and the author of several books. And his other books were not related to food or culinary knowledge, but rather to tafsir, or religious texts. He opens the book with 15 chapters about several topics about cleaning the kitchen, cleaning fish and meat, how to be a host, and how to be a guest, and how to be a server. So it kind of also informs you of the events that were being organized at that time, and also how to write an invitation card, how to format it, how to make it look nice, you know. Having people over for parties and jamuans, as he called them. 31 recipes, nasi biryani Maharani, so Muar's other name, Banda Maharani. We know that this particular title, Jangka Rampayan, was published in 3 volumes. Yep. And not sure why he called it Jangka Rampayan, but Jangka, apart from being a term describing a period of time, it also describes the tujuan, or harapan, meaning aspirations. So mixed aspirations of cookery. Also to highlight the illustrations, so a lot of the pre-war books had very rudimentary illustrations for cooking utensils. And this one especially, this book had a lot of information about biryani, different kinds of biryani. So the pot where you make the biryani, the lid of the biryani, the colander that is used, the large colander that is used to drain the biryani rice, and the scooper, as well as a stirrer at the bottom. Next is Tambi Chik, Abdul Karim, signaling his Indian background, Tambi being the word for little brother, who wrote Pemimpin Memasak, also from Muar, published in Muar in 1938. The first edition was probably published in 1935, though I haven't had access to that yet. And this book, he hoped, in his preface, he wrote that he hoped that young Malay girls could increase the knowledge that they already had gained from their mothers. So signifying that these girls were learning already from their mothers how to cook, but at the same time, these texts were meant to be supplementary. And 30 recipes, a pretty short book for nasi dan lauk-lauk cara Melayu. Okay, that's not enough time. Okay, so for the last one here, we have Cik Maria Muhammad Hashim and her daughter Hairani, who wrote the book Ilmu Masak-Masak. And this was published first in Penang in 1937, and subsequently would have many editions, including one that is available at the library from 1952. And you can see the difference in the covers. The first one, a picture of a European or Western lady, because a lot of the formatting was also copied from Western cookbooks that were available in British Malaya. But subsequently, after the war, 1952, you have a more local image representing the book. Okay, just a bit quickly, maybe I just highlight two persons from this section. There was also a book written by the Education Department of the Federation of Malaya called Peraturan Memasak, and it features recipes from all across British Malaya, including Singapore, for kuihs, lauk, sayur, all kinds of baldu and kuih bangkit. Not sure why it's not under kuih, but I guess it must have been something so trendy and so something that people really wanted to learn was kuih bangkit, kuih baulu, and puddings. And you can see where the recipes come from. Oops. Okay, so Siti Radia, she perhaps you could read actually more about her online, but just a little bit about her is that she was very prolific as a cookbook writer post-war, and her cookbook Hidangan Wanita Sekarang, the one on the corner, top corner, it was first published in 1949, and it was reprinted 3 times before it was republished in Rumi or Romanized Malay script in 1961. And advertisements for her book was still in the Berita Harian up till 1969. So there was people actually who might have bought her books even into the 60s. And she was actually married to Harun Aminur Rashid, who was a very prolific writer, teacher in Singapore at that time. And some of her books were actually published by him. So for post-war books, unlike the earlier books, there was also a rising sentiment of nationalism within the books, and a lot of magazines at that time, as well as newspapers, and in which they looked to Indonesia as an intellectual hotspot for ideas, because by then Indonesia had already attained their independence from the Dutch. However, British Malaya was still lagging in that sense. Just to read you the preface for Siti Radia, which I have in English here, but I'll say it in Malay in her words. Kandungan buku ini saya kumpulkan dari percubaan-percubaan kuih-kuih cara baharu yang saya dapati elok jadinya, iaitu dari tunjuk ajar sahabat-sahabat saya yang mahir di dalam memasak kuih. Saya kumpulkan sebanyak 50 jenis kuih ini untuk percubaan saudari-saudari saya yang lain. So again, targeted at women. She also says that a lot of these kuih were copied from women in the West. Yes, and lastly, at the end, she hopes that this cookbook will be a bit of service to her bangsa, the nation, and also especially the women. These are a few of her other books, Memilih Selera. On the cover, however, is a Hollywood actress which Christopher Tan has identified as Jane Russell, who was very popular, a sex symbol in the 1950s and 60s, which was not uncommon to use pictures of Hollywood stars on the covers for magazines at that time, like Fashion, Hiburan, Aneka, Warna, and Asmara. Also, you see the vogue for buttercream cakes in the corner there, also from her book. This one, she acknowledges her teacher, Madam Asma, as teaching her, having taught her these recipes. And also, just to mention, Radia's book was the first installment of Galiga Limited, the publisher's women's series. These are also other books in the women's series by Galiga, looking at puddings, cakes, and also lauk from across the Nusantara. And lastly, to end off, this is going way beyond post-war to post-independence. Of course, there's a lot of books that were published in 1970s, 1980s, Even up to today, you have a plethora of cookbooks. But this one I have to highlight. Hidangan Warisan Kita by Madam Asfia Abdullah, who was someone who was born in Kampung Glam, and she also passed away in Kampung Glam, living her whole life there. She was a Ma Andam. Before that, she was a teacher at the Rochor Malay School, teaching people how to cook, how to sew, how to embroider, and also how to make tekat, which is a traditional Malay form of sewing. And she produced this. She had this published in 1968, and a year later she passed away. And it was a life goal to actually document food from her heritage. Food that she called the Pusaka Ibu, being very proud of what her mother had given to her. And she wanted to capture all of it. And also includes things that have vanished, like the bunga kobis on the cover, which is a hantaran dish at Malay weddings, which you no longer see today. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toffa. Looking at Madam Asfia's picture with the food out of her house on Bustra Street, it reminds me of my days growing up. She was a neighbor of mine and a friend of my grandmother.